Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another video, and the last video in this three-part series covering unpopular Pokemon opinions. And boy howdy, are they unpopular indeed, because I've already taken some hits for expressing these. But like I said in part 2, that's okay. Disagreement is okay. Believe it or not. Last time we covered the topics of graphics and an open world format, leaving us at 5 unpopular opinions so far. And by the way, these actually are my opinions, I'm not just pulling them from somewhere. But as you've hopefully seen, there's some nuance to them. For example, in the part 2 video, I mentioned that the outcry for better graphics in Pokemon games was way overblown, yet I fully acknowledge that later games like Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield did have issues. Are they perfect games? Of course not. No game is. Well, except maybe for Mario's early years fun with numbers. I mean, those kids look pretty dadgum happy to me. Or maybe Mario is missing. Because let me tell you, it is... Anyway, we also talked about the whole open world thing and how I didn't think that Pokemon was meant for an open world, or at least not destined for it. And of course, some of you agreed and some of you disagreed. Regardless, I do truly love Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet, and I've had a blast playing both Gens 8 and 9. And unless Winds and Waves introduces an even more ridiculously efficient shiny hunting method, I'm probably going to be making sandwiches and running around on the back of my prehistoric motorcycle dragon for the foreseeable future. Cause that crap is just straight up satisfying. But speaking of Scarlet and Violet, those games introduced quite a few changes to the main series games, some of them being pretty big departures from what we're used to seeing. The most obvious, of course, being the open world format, but there's more. And that brings us to unpopular opinion number 6. Pokemon mechanics don't need to be reinvented every generation because the core formula still works. If criticism of modern Pokemon games graphics is at the top of the pile for what I'm convinced is a very small but loud minority of players who have made dissing Game Freak a spectator sport, then the call for an overhaul to Pokemon's mechanics is probably second place. And you know how it goes, it's things like, Pokemon needs to ditch turn-based battles. The era of the action RPG is here, and Pokemon needs to get with the times. Bring back Mega Evolution. Side note, I don't actually have a problem with this one. I personally love Mega Evolution, and of course it was brought back with Legends ZA. I'm just using it as an example. Or, get rid of Mega Evolution, because you know there's somebody out there who don't like it. Oh, and wouldn't you know it, there is. But this is really the overall point that I've been trying to make throughout these 3 videos, is that ultimately it comes down to opinion, and everybody has one. Some are more aggressive than others, but hey, they're entitled to it. And I don't know about you, but it seems like Pokemon fans are some of the most opinionated folks around. And as toxic as some of it can be, I do think it's actually a good sign as far as the series is concerned, or at least a positive indicator of the franchise's long-term health. People debating about stuff really just shows that they care about it, and unfortunately, as we've talked about, negativity and outrage tend to drive more engagement online than really anything else.
Just do what I do when I have problems. Scream!
Please note that I'm not saying that internet negativity is a good thing in and of itself. Okay, disclaimer over. With that said, I do think a lot of that debate has been generated by the games bouncing around too much with what we call gimmicks or battle mechanics. And I'm talking about Mega Evolution, Z-moves, Dynamax and Gigantamax, Terastallization, and so on. Some of these, like double battles first introduced in Gen 3, have become widely loved and enduring features. Even the standard for competitive play in this case. But others, like the strong and agile style moves introduced in Legends Arceus, kinda seem to pop in for one game or one generation and then are never really seen or heard from again. Kinda like that acquaintance of yours that you ran into at the grocery store like a month ago and they said, hey, we should hang out, and then nothing. What's that all about? And of course, strong style moves basically continued in Legends ZA as plus moves, but I'm just using that as an example. And with Pokemon Champions now bringing all of these different battle mechanics across the generations to one place, it seems like some of the more obscure ones will live on in the sort of battling sandbox that Champions is. And that's cool. With Pokemon's complexity being one of its biggest draws for me personally, I also think there's such a thing as too complicated. And with all of these gimmicks or mechanics changing every generation or being introduced and then removed and then reintroduced, like with Mega Evolution, we've kind of been left with a rat's nest of formats that's hard to keep up with. At least for me anyway. Maybe this is another instance of Game Freak trying to placate the critics. but personally, I don't feel like it's necessary. We've come to expect a new thing every game. Whether it's evolving one stage further, prancing around like a Taylor Swift backup dancer, getting, bigger, or fatter, or growing a weird crystal on the top of the head. It's just a lot, and I kinda wish that we could chill out with the standard formula for a while. You know, picking a starter and exploring the region, and catching and battling, and all that stuff. No more, no less. It's what made Pokemon awesome to begin with, and I don't see a need for big changes. Again, probably unpopular, but that's kind of the point here. Next up at number 7, we've got modern games aren't worse and older games aren't better. We've just changed. I've touched on this in the last few videos, but I don't know that I've said it explicitly yet. So now, consider it said. Unpopular? Sure. Inviting more haters? Probably. But I'll just take the same approach that I always have.
Can you read, my son?
Well, that depends. Can you go yourself?
But yeah, I truly do think that the whole perception of modern Pokemon games being worse and older Pokemon games being better has a lot more to do with psychology and changes in culture than it does with any kind of objective standard of quality. Gen 1ers has been a negative stereotype among fans for a long time now, and it seems like that concept should probably be expanded. Gen 1 through 5ers? I guess. Not really as catchy. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. It's all over YouTube. Stuff like why Gen fill in the blank was peak Pokemon. And on and on. I mean, I'm as eaten up with nostalgia as the next guy, don't get me wrong. And for me, there will never again be anything like experiencing Gold, Silver, and Crystal as a kid. It's probably not an overstatement to say that Gen 2 is a core part of my identity at this point, and to this day, it still elicits such emotion for me. But yet, those days are gone. And I have to accept that. Ultimately, as much as I'm tempted to say that Pokemon was just better then, the truth is that that's just where my inner child lives, psychologically. And that sentimentality is probably not just for one particular video game, but for the era that it represents. This is very much a thing for millennials right now, and possibly even more so than previous generations. I mean, there you go. In many ways, we're the last generation of humans in developed nations to have lived in a world that wasn't driven by algorithms, attention, and agitation. A world that wasn't constantly connected digitally, but all too often totally disconnected socially. It makes sense that we'd have a deep fondness for forms of media that take us back, even if just for a moment, to a time when things were more peaceful, quiet, and innocent. And honestly, just better, in my opinion, but that's a whole nother subject. Maybe I'm contradicting myself, but the point that I'm trying to make is that it's not that Pokemon was better, it was that everything was better. At least as far as we're concerned. Because for people around my age, it was a time before the deadliest terrorist attacks in human history and the decades-long war that followed. Before a series of historically costly and deadly tsunamis, hurricanes, and earthquakes. Before institutional greed destroyed the economy just as we were entering the job market. Before enormously powerful tech companies reshaped the way we see ourselves and others. Before widespread refugee crises. Before a novel respiratory virus destroyed the economy again, and before unprecedented political upheaval. And speaking of political, I'll stop there at the risk of getting, well, too political. But hopefully you see what I mean. Of course we think Pokemon was better then because we think everything was better then. And I think we can make one heck of a case that it actually was. But ultimately, that's a subjective determination. The world is always changing, and so are the people in it. If you asked your average 12-year-old if they'd like to go back in time and live without their iPad and whatever the heck that is that they're watching on that thing, the answer would probably be no. And one day, they'll look back fondly on today, wishing their consciousness hadn't been digitized and uploaded to a planet-sized supercomputer powering the omniscient AI cyber god that we'll all be enslaved by. Yeah, that was a joke. Or at least, I hope it was. Next up at number 8, we've got a similar but big one. Here we go. Modern Pokemon designs aren't worse. This is something that I've talked about a little bit before, and it's a really common thing that you'll probably come across when perusing certain particularly whiny corners of the internet. And we've all heard it before. A trash bag? Really? You have got to be kidding me. What's next? A Pokemon based on a lamp? Oh, and wouldn't you know, there it is. Oh, let me guess. Next they'll design a Pokemon based on a keyring. See what I mean? Yeah, this is another area where I think the criticism is entirely misplaced. And disagreeing with it is probably a great way to get kicked out of an in-person meetup or at least banned from a subreddit. To dare to suggest that modern Pokemon designs are at least as good, if not better, than older Pokemon designs, or to just point out that the idea that modern designs are bad is really just more of a meme than anything, well, it's committing heresy against established fandom orthodoxy that's perpetuated by extremely zealous character design purists. Now, to clarify, I am not saying that every Pokemon design is as good as any other, and I'm not even saying that I like every Pokemon design. I'm just saying that on the whole, there's really not that much difference between the designs of Gens 1 through 3 and say the designs from Gens 7 through 9. Or at least that neither are any better or worse in any objective sense. The trouble with this one, like a lot of the other opinions that I've thrown out there, is that it's a very subjective subject. Subjective subject. Is that proper to say? I don't know. But you know what I mean. We're talking about the eye of the beholder here. Everybody has their favorites, and something that I think is a great design might be one that you think isn't so great. Now, that's not to say that we can't apply a little common sense. I mean, if the last few gens were packed with Pokemon that were like pieces of crap with googly eyes slapped on them, that might be a problem that most of us could agree on. But obviously, that's not the case. In fact, when looking back at designs from Gen 1 and comparing them to newer generations, if anything, the designs have gotten more complex, intricate, bold, elegant, and thematic. While again, that's ultimately a matter of perspective, I don't think there's much room for people to just say the designs are worse now across the board. Take, for example, a Pokemon like Zekrom. One of my personal favorites, not only for its design, but also its typing and lore. It's a freaking blacked out electric generator dragon. That's just as metal as it gets. Anyway, Zekrom is a good example of a cool, kaiju-like design that I think captures the original aesthetic essence of classic Pokemon, while deviating from it just enough to stand out. It's complex, with several intricate individual aspects, but all of these come together to make up a cohesive, sleek, and seemingly simple design when viewed as a whole. It could be considered just one color, black, which fits the titles and themes of the Unova games. But the variations like the red eyes, shades of gray against the blacks, and then the electric blue that you see when its generator tail fires up, gives it a subtle sophistication that I think makes it one of the best Pokemon designs ever. It's also beastly, dinosaur or dragon-like to be sure, but just humanoid enough to exude both raw power and intellect, which makes it that much more awesome. Zekrom is actually the favorite Gen 5 Pokemon of Ken Sugimori, the legendary character designer and art director who co-founded Gamefreak along with Satoshi Tajiri. According to Bulbapedia, the initial design drafts for what would become Zekrom and its counterpart Reshiram were done by Keiko Moritsugu, while their final designs were created by Ken Sugimori. And with Gen 5 probably being the one generation that's taken the most hits for its designs, especially for the object-based ones like Litwick and Vanillite, hopefully this helps support my case. I've gotten into this subject a little bit before, I don't remember which video, but the complaining just seems ridiculous when in Gen 1, which is widely considered the most iconic, and for good reason, you've got designs that are literally just a freaking rock with a face, and a couple of magnets stuck together, and a Pokeball. And two of them that are actually pretty dang close to literal piles of crap with the googly eyes. Okay, yeah, sludge or toxic waste, but come on. Same difference. And don't misunderstand me, I'm not hating on Gen 1 and I love all these Pokemon. But I'm just pointing out again what I hope is the overarching point across these videos. All the criticism is really more about shifts in culture, psychology, expectations, etc. than any actual differences in quality. Because a lot has changed in the world since 1996, including us. And that brings us to our next opinion. Number 9, Pokemon doesn't need to grow up with the fans. It's supposed to stay accessible for kids. Okay, hopefully I can articulate this in a way that makes sense. As you can probably tell by now, I argue with myself a lot, and honestly I struggle to come to any single conclusion on any given subject. So my opinions on pretty much everything are really nuanced and hard to explain in a single soundbite, and this is definitely one of them. I think there's a sense in which Pokemon is absolutely a franchise for children. Whether you define it by the games, the TCG, the animation, or whatever. It's marketed to children, the reading level of the game's dialogue is at about a 3rd grade level, there's toys, there's kids' clothes, and so on. However, I don't think Pokemon as a whole is for kids to the exclusion of adults. To use an example, the Super Mario movie. Well, I guess there's 2 of them now. But yeah, it's for kids, right? The same goes for really any G or PG rated animated film. There's bright colors, there's simple dialogue and humor, there's all that. But who's taking the kids to the movie? Yeah, the parents. Duh, I know, but let me finish. The adults aren't just dropping off Hayden and Braden and then loitering in the parking lot pulling on Marlboro Lights for an hour and 45 minutes. Well, maybe they are in some cases. And shame on them for being a bad example to their kids. Camel menthols are obviously far superior. I'm kidding. Please don't smoke. But no, they're watching it too. And they're enjoying it. Because why? They grew up with Mario either on the original NES or on the SNES, just like me. Seeing their childhood on the big screen evokes real emotion for them, and they're catching all these obscure references to different games and characters they've grown to love over the years that their kids would never get. A 6-year-old probably isn't going to know that the penguins in the opening scene are a reference to Super Mario 64, specifically the penguins you find in Cool Cool Mountain. Screw that penguin slide race, by the way, that crap is frustrating. Oh, and I guess the penguins have appeared in a lot of other Mario games actually, including Galaxy, but hopefully you see my point. For another example, you see King Bob-omb in the movie, and I doubt many kids are going to understand that that's from Super Mario 64, being the first boss who you defeat by being, well, a royal pain in the butt. So in other words, to say that Pokemon is just for kids, period, is to ignore the fact that tons of adults love the series too. And of course, Game Freak, the Pokemon company, and Nintendo know this. Pokemon has remained enduringly successful for this reason. First of all, even if Pokemon was targeted exclusively to kids, who's to say that grown-ups can't enjoy it too? That's just stupid. And the fact is, it's not just targeted to kids, and many aspects of the franchise are specifically targeted at older audiences, especially recently. You see this with things like clothes and merchandise and the more complex and action-oriented Legends games, and even the in-person day out and night out events announced this year for the 30th anniversary. One being geared towards families and kids, and one towards just adults. As another example, the people that I play Go with are almost all adults, many of them much older than me, like in their 50s and 60s. I have honestly been shocked to see how many older people are obsessed with Pokemon Go.
I love the young people.
In the local group that I play with, there's one guy who literally uses a walker to get around, but there he is, hoofing it right along with us, going from one raid to the next. And he's an absolutely delightful person to talk to. And then of course, you've got younger parents like me who tend to bring their kids. The fact is, Pokemon is multi-generational. It doesn't just have one audience, and it definitely ain't just you. It also doesn't mean that you're going to like every single little thing. You might have decided that the newer games just aren't for you, and that's okay, but don't be the person that has to go and ruin it for the rest of us. Because honestly, there are plenty of us, plenty more than the gripers, if I had to guess, who actually enjoy these games. Not because we think they're flawless specimens of technical acumen, but because they're near and dear to our hearts. They're fun, and they bring us closer to the people that we enjoy hanging out with. Our friends, family, and for some of us, our kids. And several of you have already touched on this in the comments. To quote one from Starspark3071, people who started with the first games and who are now adults are not the only people playing Pokemon games. There are a lot of younger fans who got started on games much later down the line, and there are always new kids getting started on Pokemon with the latest games. Exactly, and it's like some people don't even think about that. The Pokemon Company International has its mission statement front and center on its homepage. The world of Pokemon connects people across the globe, beloved by kids, adults, and every trainer in between. These incredible creatures have crossed borders and language barriers to reach the hearts of millions for over 25 years, bringing people together through the joy of play and discovery. I think that says it best. And that leaves us with our last unpopular opinion and the conclusion to them all. Number 10. Pokemon is still fun. People just forgot how to play it without treating it like a job. And by people here, I mostly mean people from the ages of about 30 to 40. Given recent changes to culture and the changes that that's caused in us, it's not surprising to me that a tone of criticism, cynicism, and hey, everything sucks now would define how a loud group online views the Pokemon games. It's kind of how we view everything now, and I'm included in that. It's really just a natural reaction to the last few decades of hyper-consumerism, corporatism, and the resulting societal instability that we've all had to endure. Nowadays, productivity is king. and anything short of that makes us feel like failures. Of course, progress isn't inherently a bad thing, but fixation on it, ironically, is paralyzing. We've been conditioned to feel a need to improve everything about ourselves all at once. But that's just not how humans work. And speaking of work, what we do to earn the money that we need to survive shouldn't define us. If it's something that we enjoy doing, that's great. But most of the time, for most people, it's not. Instead, we find ourselves so drained by the mundane that we don't have anything left to give for the things that should define us. The things that interest us, bring us joy, connect us with others, and let us have fun. And then, even when we do attempt to squeeze in a few minutes for, say, a Pokemon game, we tend to approach it with the same mentality that we've developed for the 40-hour grind. Checking things off the list, the sense of urgency, the feeling of inadequacy when we haven't done something perfectly. I bring this up because I've experienced it and I'm still recovering from it. But I have to believe that it's something we can all recover from if we identify it and make an effort to slowly but surely reclaim a fun-based perspective. Part of that is no longer viewing our favorite games as just another monotonous task or consumer product, but for once, just letting ourselves play. And so there we have it, 10 unpopular Pokemon opinions across 3 different videos. I hope you guys have enjoyed this mini-series, and if you have, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and drop me a like and a hype and all the YouTubey stuff that I'm still trying to figure out how it all works, as we approach the incredible milestone of 1,000 subscribers. So thanks again, guys, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay.
I'll be right back, alright?
You getting pizza?
Yeah. Okay.
It's Domino's night, buddy. Domino's night. Hang on, my wife's starting the car. She's going to get us some Domino's. It's Domino's night, buddy. You all like Domino's? I like Domino's. I used to not think it was good, but then I guess it was COVID. They stepped up their game during COVID now. Domino's is like, or at least the one in our area, it's consistently good.